Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Today, I am excited to be joined by Louise Swanson to chat about her latest book, Lights Out, a gripping thriller that explores class, grief, and the secrets we carry. It will 100% keep you up at night, and if you haven't already, go read it because it's out now and published by Hodder. Louise Swanson is the pen name of best-selling author Louise Beach, who has published 8 novels with Orenda Books and a memoir, 18 Seconds, with Mardel. Her debut novel, How to Be Brave, was released in 2015 and has since been named a Guardian Reader's Pick and hit number 4 in the Amazon charts, and the stage adaptation of the book has just concluded a 22-date tour. Her work has previously been shortlisted for the Romantic Novel Award and the Polari Prize, and she won Best Book of the Year with her 2019 psychological thriller Call Me Stargirl. Louise also blogs via her website louisebeach.co.uk, which is great because I've been reading some of her blogs myself. Here to chat about her latest book, welcome Louise to A Pair of Bookends.
Thank you so much, Hannah. This is just lovely. Do you know what's really weird? Because of the time of day we're doing it, it's going to start light and I've got a feeling it's going to get dark as we go on.
It's going to get darker and darker.
Doesn't that fit the theme of the book?
It definitely fits the theme of the book. Let's get into it. We can't get into it because I have not asked my favourite question, which is, what are you currently reading?
Okay, I've just finished something, so it has to be that one because I haven't started anything else. I have just finished Beautiful People by Amanda Jennings. It just came out, actually. I did get an early copy, but I've been so busy that I've only just read it. Oh, my word. If you liked Saltburn and other things about wealthy, privileged, nasty people kind of getting their comeuppance, shall we say, if you love that kind of thing, you'll love it. It's so deliciously dark. It was brilliant. So I've just finished that, so I really recommend that.
That sounds right up my street. Oh, I love stuff like that. I actually quickly want to squeeze in another question before we get into the book, because I want to ask about the stage adaptation of your book. How did that go?
Oh my word. I'm kind of on this post-show buzz because it only finished on Saturday, and Saturday was actually my birthday as well.
Oh, happy birthday!
So the last show was on my actual birthday. I mean, how the
that's so special.
Absolutely aligned, didn't it? It's been completely surreal. It's been like nothing I've experienced before because it's so different to the books. Because with the books, you kind of don't see people enjoying them. You know they might be reading and they message you, but to have a play on, you actually watch the audience reaction and you have people there who'll come and talk to you and who've watched it, and it's just been surreal. And I'm just in this post buzz. I'm a bit scared because I've got a feeling I'm going to come down off that buzz soon, but I'm just in this happy place.
Yeah, I love that so much. I'm an actor, so I definitely get the post show, there's a post show buzz and then there's this horrible come down from it. But I hope you can ride that buzz for a long while, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so, because I'm still sort of chatting to them and still got stuff to share. You just think it's carrying up. But I've got a feeling about Thursday, Friday, I might be in a bit of a slump. So I'm going to do something nice. Yeah, you've
got to do something nice for yourself when you hit the kind of post-show blues. But I'm glad you're in the post-show buzz right now. That's the best time.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so pleased that it went really well, and 22 dates is amazing.
I know, phenomenal.
Yeah.
I when it first happened, because I'll just quickly say that I actually wrote the play before I wrote the book.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, years ago. I wrote the play about 13 years ago, and I didn't know how to do anything with it or anything like that. And then last year, I was watching a friend in a show, because I have a lot of actor friends, because I used to be an usher in a theatre, so I have a lot of actor friends too. And I was just really cheeky when I was at the theatre. Someone told me who the artistic director was, and I just thought, I'm just going to tell him about the play and the fact that it's a book now, so maybe that'll help. And he read it, he loved it, and he just said, we'll get this on. And I didn't expect
gosh.
2 dates. Yeah.
That's incredible. So did you adapt it for the stage as well, or did somebody assist with that? What was...
No, it was already a fully written script, as in it was a fully written script stage play, because I did a course about 13 years ago.
Right.
And so I wrote it, and then I didn't know what to do.
You had the full thing already?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sitting in a drawer. It's literally the writer's dream, isn't it? Something that's sitting in your drawer doing nothing.
For that length of time as well. That's incredible.
I know.
Oh, I love that.
Who knows what else might happen? You never know. Someone else might
exactly. You just don't know. Somebody else might have watched and want to take it.
Well, if it comes to your end, to Manchester.
That would be, let's manifest that.
Yeah,
that
let's
would be.
manifest. There are a couple of juicy female roles, so yeah.
Well, I'm here and I'm ready.
Okay, then. I won't forget.
Let's get into Lights Out, because I absolutely loved this book, and oh my God, like when I say it keeps you up at night, it keeps you up at night. Can you tell the listeners what Lights Out is all about?
I guess to summarise best, there are kind of two things that I feel like it's about, and I know there'll end up being more than two because I'm a chatterbox, so we'll start with two. First of all, I think it's about our fears and how our fears define us and control us, whatever that fear is, how and kind of where those fears come from, because they often come from a deeper place, don't they?
Yeah.
And it's also, for me, about how the monsters, shall we say, and not always the obvious ones. Like, I always think monsters are not creatures that hide in wardrobes and hide under your bed, or hairy and scary. Sometimes the monsters in your life are the normal, everyday people, but I won't say any more than that. Sometimes those people are the monsters. So it's kind of, those are the two main themes I would say. But I'm sure we'll come to others.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great way of thinking about the book. And the premise of the book is that the government have put in place this lights out sort of scheme that's, I guess, trying to prevent climate change. I don't know how far in the future this is set, but it feels like it's a few years, would you say?
Yes, you are good.
Okay.
I purposefully didn't name a year. I didn't want to for this one. I did for End of Story. I was very specific with End of Story because I saw it very specifically. This one, I just felt like it's near future, almost touchable, but not quite. Could happen.
Yeah. I got that. And I think, we get a sense of like the pandemic has been and gone, like we know about COVID, but I'm guessing that things have started to kind of get slightly more concerning in terms of climate change, to the point where they're like, we need to do something about it. And then they create this lights out scheme where basically everyone's electricity goes off at 8 p.m. every night. But London don't get any of that. They just get to live as they please.
That was me being a bit political, and I'm not even.
Oh no, I love that. We're all for that. Like, I think it's an important thing to think about. And I was wanting to know, first of all, what the initial inspiration for that concept was.
Again, a couple of things, because I'm one of those writers. I don't just get one idea.
I love this.
5, and then I put them all together in a book. I can never just have one idea. They all come together. So the first inspiration really that got the ball rolling was, I'm not a very good sleeper and I get up quite often, and I often look out of the window because I'm nosy, and I am often curious about what's happening in the street at night when everyone's asleep. And opposite us, I've just moved, but in the previous house I lived in, every single night there was a house nearly opposite me, and they had the bedroom light on all night, every night.
Oh wow.
And I just thought, is it that they're insomniacs? Is it that there's nobody living there, but then why would that be on? Is it that they don't like the dark? And that was the one that stayed with me. I thought, maybe they don't like the dark. And I was like, oh, bless them. Gosh, they leave the lights on all night. And I just thought, gosh, what would they do if there's no electricity? And I thought, oh, what would you do if there's no electricity? So I've kind of got that going on, like, no electricity. Then I was in a hotel staying somewhere, and there was a really weird news channel that wasn't ours, and it had South African news. I don't even know what the channel was. And they have regular kind of blackout things that are planned. They're not as long as all night, and they're not all the time. But when the electricity's low, they'll have times where the electricity goes off. And there was a guy on who was a diabetic. Now, my daughter's a type 1 diabetic, and he said that his medication often goes off because the fridge goes off. And then there's that going in my head and thinking, oh my word, all the things that would happen if he didn't have electricity. And then also my real life sister Claire, she works as a palliative carer like Grace, the main character. And I was just kind of thinking that our fear of the dark is almost like our fear of death, really.
Absolutely.
I think that, isn't it? That's what we're really scared of, perhaps, death. So all of those things kind of came together as the story.
That's, I mean, that's so fascinating that the person that living opposite you, I need to know.
There now. So I'm like, do they still have them on? I mean, I need to drive down there at night and find out.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was lay awake last night. I couldn't get to sleep, but I sometimes struggle to sleep. And I was like staring at like the shadows on the ceiling. And I was like, my boyfriend woke up and was like, you okay? And I was like, what do you think that is on the ceiling? And I know, Louise, it's your book that's had me thinking.
Sorry. Not sorry.
I love it so much. And thing that really stuck with me was the class aspect. I'm always thinking about class. I'm from a working class background. Like I said before, I'm an actor, so I'm thinking about it in terms of, how that affects me as a creative. So I love reading about stuff about people being impacted that are in kind of like lower or working, like from the lower or working classes, basically.
Yeah.
And I found it so interesting in this book that it was those people that were the most affected by this scheme. And you hear stories throughout the book of like the MPs who were just kind of living it up, they're fine. One of them happens to fall over and it's like, oh, now we're going to be concerned. And it's like, well, what about the people that have already been struggling? And I feel like that it was quite a nod to what we not only experienced during COVID, but also what we've been seeing with the cost of living crisis. Was it something that you were kind of consciously exploring with the class aspects, or do you think it was more subconscious?
Yeah, a bit of both of those things. It's interesting you say the cost of living crisis, because I wrote it during the first cost of living crisis that we were kind of speaking of, the end of 22, when it was the first time we came up with that phrase, didn't we?
Yeah.
When the heating bills had gone up, genuine people were, getting ill with the cold, the elderly, the vulnerable, small children. So I was writing it during that time, and I'm not, I'm lucky. I'm not vulnerable, and I definitely working class.
Yeah.
But there are people worse off than me, but I can't afford to have the heating on in the day.
No,
I'm
I
on my
can't.
own at home. I just can't justify it.
No.
And so I was sitting there, with a blanket around my feet, this kind of thing. And I was just thinking, gosh, I'm relatively okay and I can cope, but what must it be like for someone who's 85 and can't have the blooming heating on? And so, yes, and I suppose that is political. That's political because we're talking about the elderly,
absolutely.
those on benefits.
Yeah.
And obviously those on benefits are probably 99% working class people.
Yeah.
In poverty. So I do find myself often writing about working class because I grew up in a council house with a single parent mum. I didn't go to university. I got pregnant when I was 19 doing my A levels, and then I was a single mum.
Yeah.
So I'm coming from that background, and I'm still that person, just because I'm a writer now, still that person. So I really love to explore just the lives of working class people. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't know how to write a middle class person because what do they do?
Yeah. What do you guys do?
I don't know.
What do you do with all that money?
Yeah, so it's normal for me, and most of my books are set in or around Hull. I like to do that as well because you don't get many books. I mean, up north, you might get a few set, say Manchester or Newcastle.
Yeah.
We call, I always joke about this, I write about the crap north. Because people always say Newcastle's cool, Manchester's cool, which they are. Love those cities. Even Leeds, love Leeds too. But then in places like Hull, maybe, or Wigan or something, mentioned, do they? So I like to just explore real life, to me, characters. And yes, I would 100% say that people in that bracket will suffer more with anything that's going on, like COVID. And if there was a lights out, we all know that those people would suffer more.
Oh, absolutely. And I love to see that northern representation. It's just so refreshing. You see it on the odd kind of TV show, but I feel like not so much as it used to be. But it is refreshing to read it in a book, because I feel like a lot of the books that I read, it's either some kind of, I don't know, fictional setting, or it's definitely based in London. Even if they don't mention it, that they're speaking about London. So it's just so nice to read about somewhere else up north, somewhere that you recognise.
There's just certain language as well. Like when I write books, I talk about breakfast, dinner, and tea still. And like obviously dinner for do you know what? Some working class people, to be fair, might call an evening meal dinner, because that's a little bit as well about the year, as in the era that we're in, because that could be my age that makes me say breakfast, dinner, and tea. It might not just be a northern thing; it might be both of those things. So that
I definitely say tea.
Right, okay, me too. Yeah, breakfast, dinner, and tea. Yeah, what we having for tea? Absolutely. And so I wanted to put that, and in Lights Out, there was a brief mention in one of the leaflets about the ingredients to make these meals at home. And I think Grace says, most people don't have those things in their cupboard. Most working class people don't have these fancy ingredients in the cupboard. And it's just the teeny tiny things like that.
Yeah.
small things like
Yeah,
that.
there's just small moments where she's like making pasta just with a bit of sauce. Like it's
Yeah,
not anything
peas and
extravagant, is it?
pasta.
Like, yeah. And
Exactly.
going out to the cafe with her mum, having like jacket potato. Love stuff like
Yeah,
that. Because you
favorite.
just don't read stuff like that. It's
Yeah, that's my
crazy.
favorite thing to have. If I'm where I am, honestly, I love jacket
Oh my
potatoes.
God, stunning.
Yeah, best ever, best ever. I could be in the Ivy, and I'm like, did you jacket
You got a
potato?
jacket potato.
To be fair, I did go to the Ivy once with my lovely agent and publisher, and I actually had shepherd's pie because
Stop. I
it
love
wasn't
that.
posh shepherd's pie because it had a little leaf on top of it and it was
You were
tall.
like, fling
But
that off.
I was like, oh, I must have shepherd's pie here. It was lovely. It was
Oh,
very, very
stunning.
good.
I want to try it now.
Shepherd's pie in the Ivy.
I love
Anyway,
it. Let's talk about Grace, your protagonist. Well, I should say one of your protagonists, but I will get to that in a second. And as you said before, Grace works in end of life care. What drew you to writing about that role? Obviously, I think you said your sister works in that role, but how much research did you have to put in? Was it just a lot of conversations with your sister? Like, how did that work?
yes, a lot of conversation because when I write that kind of thing, I don't like to get that wrong
Yeah.
because all you need is someone who does that job to read it and not get on board. And you've lost that reader because we all know, don't we? If you read about something that you thoroughly know and they get it really wrong, you get a bit irritated, don't you? You can't help it.
Yeah.
You think, oh, it doesn't, no, it doesn't happen like that. So every time I was writing those scenes, I would ask my sister down to what's in the room, how many rooms are there, what's likely to happen when that happens, just everything. And she was just fantastic. And she gave me it all. And I did have a reader who did the same job who messaged me and said, you researched that or you used to do it. He said, because you got it right. And I said I didn't used to
Oh,
do it, but it was my all thanks to my sister. But I kind of enjoy having to research something like that because I feel like you
yeah.
learn stuff. I
Oh,
really do. I like
absolutely.
it. Do you know what I mean? It's like good
Yeah.
to make what we know. I enjoy that, but then now and again I think write about something where you have to learn because those things stay with you, and there's a fascination really about the fact that my sister literally sees people out, as I put in the book, sees people, watches these people die, and at first you think that that's a horrific thing, and obviously it can be if somebody's suffering, but it also can be such a simple, quite nice thing. Some people just slip away,
Yeah.
some people are speaking 1 minute, they go out the room, they come back in, they've gone. It so maybe I don't know. It's a good way to not be so scared of
Yeah,
death.
I think, like you said before, like when you were talking about the fear of darkness being quite similar to the fear of death, I think it's so funny, like how afraid we are. Like we're all gonna die at some point. It's just a fact of life, but there is such a fear around it, and I think it is that kind of the unknown. So I think it's always useful to talk about these things, and I think the more we talk about it, the less daunting it seems. And I thought it was like my granddad died in at the end of February, and he was poorly for a good couple of months. But the last 2 weeks of his life, we knew that he was going to go soon, and I was like visiting like every day, especially like I think it was like the week before he died, we were told like, oh, it's probably going to be today. And my granddad was stubborn as anything and was clearly like, no, I'm not going. I'll go when I'm good and ready, thanks. So he stuck around for another week. And it was such a privilege to be able to spend that time with him.
Yeah.
And, I imagine it feels like a privilege for people like your sister that do that job all the time. And, these are incredible people that take care of them. Like the nurses that looked after my granddad were like the most special people that we've stayed in touch with because they just, they really cared for us and really like they'd come in and chat with us. They'd like have a laugh with us. They'd like, ask if we needed anything. They'd bring like massive pots of tea in just without even asking us. They just come, right, we've brought you a massive pot of tea and a massive pot of coffee because we were sat there for hours on end. And, it's those people are absolute heroes and they're not
Yeah.
really recognized. So I think it's so nice to kind of read about them in books like yours.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think those that take care of people at the end or take care of children, they're
Yeah,
the ones who have to have a special gift, don't they? Because if you can look
100%.
after children when they're ill, which I don't know if I could do that, I'll be honest,
No.
children who are ill, you've got to be special and to be compassionate enough to be there at the end. You definitely have to be, yeah, a little bit magic, don't you?
100%, yeah, 100%. And it was so nice to kind of read about that after I'd had that experience earlier this
Yeah.
year. It was really nice to read about that and think about
Mm.
because there was so many facts that like you just don't know. And I remember speaking to my friend who had been there when her mum died and when her dad died, and I was asking her like, okay, what should I expect? Like, what happens? And she gave me like a full on like breakdown of like, oh, well, this is what happens to their breathing, and you might hear this noise, and they might have like this last surge of energy, and it's certain things that you have no clue about. So I think it's right, like you can tell that you've thoroughly researched this, but it is such an interesting topic.
I do like to write about topics that are a bit taboo and that people don't discuss, like death, I suppose. And then I
Yeah.
write often about tricky relationships with mothers, which is a bit of a
Yes.
taboo. And then I wrote about a young autistic man in one of my books
Yes.
who just wants to have sex, and that was a taboo, obviously. But
Yeah.
I enjoy it because these are things we should talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Now, you do have a second protagonist with Tom. He's kind of less prominent in the book to Grace, but he's still, we see his point of view. Were you always going to feature his perspective?
Yes, Tom came to me very strongly early on as this very unusual. I never like to always diagnose certain things in my book. I like to let the reader form their
Yeah.
own opinion sometimes. But I feel like, yes, he's very low on the spectrum, but I do feel he's on the
He feels neurodiverse, yeah,
he
for
does. He's
sure. Yeah.
definitely neurodiverse because the little quirks he's got. My dad is. My dad's never been diagnosed, but he's 78 and he comes from an era when they were just
They
the
wouldn't have
weird
spoken
one or
about
the
that.
naughty one.
Yeah.
We know he is, and he never will get diagnosed. Now he's 78. We know
Yeah.
he, but we know he is. And Tom's a little bit like my dad. There's just those little quirks there, but he's kind of this lovely character who he just wants to do the right thing, but
Yeah.
he makes mistakes because he doesn't quite know how to do the right thing. But I don't want to say much more about him than
No, of
that.
course.
Exactly, and give
He
anything away about him. But it was almost my favourite, even over Grace.
really.
I really loved writing him, and I was really fond of him.
He's a
That's how
very special character. He's just completely like misunderstood, isn't he?
yeah, I was very fond of him. I don't, you see, I don't think he even knows what he is, and obviously, it's alluded to that he had a difficult childhood, and I think some of that is responsible. I also think he might be bisexual, and he's not sure, and he hasn't really addressed that yet either.
Yeah.
He's got all these things, I think, that he's working through, and I just don't know. He still haunts me a bit because I don't know. I don't know. Never say never, maybe for Tom.
Ooh,
I don't know. I'm
you might
just
go
saying
back to
that.
him. I
I
was
feel
like,
like we haven't seen, maybe we haven't seen the last of Tom. Who knows? I don't
how
know. I don't
exciting.
know.
I would love that if there was a book about Tom. Now you've obviously mentioned, there are like a couple of kind of taboo things that you explore, and it's often about like the character's identity or like their background. And I think what's so interesting is there's a lot of your characters, they have these, like I described in the intro, like these secrets that they carry, or there's things in their past or their childhood that have impacted them. And I was curious, like, do you have an interest in psychology or anything?
I'm not remotely trained in
Yeah.
any way at all. But I do believe if I hadn't been able to write, I would have possibly gone into counselling in some way
Yeah.
because I'm fascinated by humans and human
You
nature and
can
what
really
makes
see that.
yeah, I love it. I love to delve deeper, and I think because I had a childhood where there were a lot of mental health issues. My mum had a lot of mental health issues. She was very depressed. She was an alcoholic. She was in and out of mental hospitals. So I grew up with an awareness of it. And although it wasn't really talked about, I still knew about it. And obviously
Yeah.
language was different then. There were certain ways that we described things back then. So I kind of grew up having to go into a room and know who's good, who's bad, who I should speak, because there was a lot of domestic violence. My mum had a lot of people living with us that shouldn't have lived with us, men, and that made me, I think, in a way, just be able to sort of understand people, read people, be fascinated by people. And it's sad that it started out as a bad thing, but I've made it to a good thing, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it is a good thing, and
Yeah.
you show real like empathy to these characters, like the ones that they are complex people because of
Yeah.
things that have happened to them,
Yeah.
and I think we're all a bit complex,
Of course
aren't we?
we
Like
are.
it's human nature.
No one's all good or all bad.
Yeah,
I mean, there are some, serial killers, okay, but there's some really, really bad
we'll
people.
just
But in the middle, just us general humans,
yeah,
we're all very flawed. I like my characters to be flawed, to have
yeah.
flaws. I don't like to write perfect people because we're not, are we?
No, absolutely not.
It's
I'm
not.
certainly not.
No,
Um,
I'm not.
but I love what you said there about going into a room and sort of assessing the room because I know that I do that quite a lot. Yeah, I'm not going to dive into it too much, but like, my home life when I was younger, it was certainly a lot of rows with my parents and there was a
Yeah,
lot of kind of issues with that. I've been in a relationship when I was younger that was quite, it wasn't great. And it's taught me to be quite, like, I'll walk into a room and I'll be kind of
yeah,
assessing if it's safe or like I'll
yeah.
notice like a tiny change in somebody's behavior or
Yes.
mannerisms. And I
Oh.
think like you really get a sense of that you really understand people in the way that you write characters. I think you write them so well. Did you kind of plot out what has happened to the characters or kind of did you plot out your characters beforehand or were there things that as you were writing you were learning about them? How does that process work?
The original thing, and don't worry, I'm not going to reveal any
Yeah, we
spoilers.
can't really
I
spoilers.
promise you I won't. I'm very mindful of what I say. The original thing that made Grace terrified of the dark was a lesser thing than it is now in the book.
Okay.
Because I wrote a certain thing. I can tell you what the original thing that made her afraid, because that isn't in the book and it's nothing
Yes.
like. So originally she got trapped in a cave while on a school trip and was there for a few hours. Don't get me wrong, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Right? That's horrifying. But there was something about me that thought, it's not quite scary enough to maybe make you be like that for the rest of your life. And I just thought, we all know that the worst fears, as we've just talked about, come from definitely childhood and things that happen, but possibly people that we know are involved in some way
Mm.
makes it more scary because we depend on and love those people and expect those people to protect and care for us. So I knew that it needed to be something, let's just say a little bit closer to home. I'll only say that.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough, and I knew I needed to go worse. And I thought, what would be awful that really would do that? And
Yeah.
so the book evolved quite a bit. There were, yeah, it evolved all the time because sometimes I will get an instinct of knowing that no, that's not quite enough,
Mm.
and then I'll just tweak it. Yeah.
I love how carefully you've tread around that.
I was careful, wasn't I? Like, yeah, say that, say that, yeah.
I want to talk about Grace's relationship with her son because I think they've got this really beautiful relationship, and she's obviously got a very complicated relationship with her own parents. And, with her own parents, there's a real issue with communication, but with her son, she's got this real open communication and it's much more positive. Was it something that you were like wanting to, like, why was it something you were wanting to explore, in terms of this sort of change in, I don't know if it's like a generational thing in
Yeah,
families, maybe?
it could be, but you've hit the nail on the head. And actually, I've never been asked that with this book or really thought about that. And you make me think, oh my God, yeah, that is so true because I have difficulty speaking to my parents for a variety of reasons. I don't even actually have a relationship with my mother anymore. I
Right.
explore that in my memoir because it was so tricky.
Yeah.
And yet, my children, I have a son and a daughter grown up now, they can come to me about anything because
Mm,
I always thought, even I'm probably the generation that doesn't speak because I just turned 54. I'm probably that generation, but I didn't want to be that kind of parent. I knew that when I had children, I wanted my children to be able to come to me about absolutely anything in the world because as a child, I didn't have a voice. Lots of
yeah.
things happened to me that I couldn't, horrific things that I couldn't speak about, which has
Yeah.
now left me, quite a traumatized adult.
Yeah.
So I wanted my children to be able to come and tell me the most horrific, the most wonderful, whatever they want to tell me. And I don't mind, who they're dating, who they like, who they don't like, what they want to do in their career, all of it. I don't mind as long as you're happy. And so I'm really glad that that shows in that relationships. I suppose that's
It
kind of
has.
like
Yeah.
my
It
own son. Yeah.
It really does show. And I think, we are seeing a shift in society in terms of like generations kind of changing. And I think parents learn a lot from their kids. And,
Mm,
if they're seeing their kids being more open and honest
yeah.
about how they're feeling. And, I think social media probably has an element to play into that. And I think, parents that have maybe been parented by someone that is from the generation where it's like, no, you just brush everything under the carpet. You don't you don't deal with anything, you don't
Yeah.
talk about it, and them learning from their children something that's just in total opposition to what they were taught by their
Yeah.
parents. I think that's just such an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think it's the Gen X, which I'm Gen X. We were like parented by the boomers.
Yeah,
Then we have the millennials, Gen Zs as our children. And you're
yeah,
quite right, I'm somewhere in the middle of I had that upbringing, which I didn't like and I don't agree with. And I have to learn to not do that. But most of my friends who are my age are similar to me, where they also didn't want to pass that down. We wanted to dilute it, and hopefully, so fingers crossed, the future children, my children, and possibly around your age, it's
yeah.
like, hopefully you guys, you'll then take that, and the next generation will have even better parents.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah,
We all
hopefully.
pass on shit to the next generation,
It is
don't we?
true, we do, yeah, because I'm by all means not perfect. I mean, if my daughter was sitting next to me now, she'd be rolling her eyes at me, I know she would. I know she would.
But you're
So, yeah.
trying, and that's the
Yeah,
main thing.
that's the thing. She'd probably say, yeah, mother, you keep trying. You keep trying.
I love that. Let's talk about something a little bit darker, which is not necessarily dark in the sense that people might be thinking, but dark in the sense of the Featherman. Now, we've got to be careful of any spoilers, but this Featherman is somebody that is breaking into people's homes around when the lights are all off. Once they're going through this scheme, he is breaking into women's homes, and he is either watching them or he's trying to do something to kind of upset,
Yeah.
and he leaves a feather behind. Was this based on any kind of real life case, or was this just completely made up?
It was completely made up. I've never had he's not a serial killer because he doesn't kill, but what was he, a serial intruder, I guess you'd maybe call him. Yeah. I've never written like a serial killer / intruder in any of my books. It was a new experience for me. But I do watch a lot of true crime documentaries, so maybe there was a little bit of an influence of that, And I just wanted to chuck in another sort of like, oh my word, not only are we having this world where it's cold and people's medication is going off and people are dying and children are going missing and things like that. Oh gosh, what if someone was making the most of this dark world? Because if you think about it, crime would be horrific in this world because we've got no lights. That someone breaks into your house and your alarms wouldn't work necessarily if it was to do with electricity. So it's making, and again, like you said about working class, it's the poorer working class unlit areas where, the crime will be on the increase. So yeah, I just wanted to amp the fear up with this guy.
Yeah, he was terrifying. And that is like my worst fear is like being alone in the house and hearing noises in the house. And I think it is specific to women because I know that when I first started living with my boyfriend, when he was out, I'd be like really nervous and he'd be like, why are you nervous? And I'm like, you just don't get this. You just don't, it really annoys me. I'm like, I want you to understand this fear because it's so real.
It's very, very, very real. I remember when I used to work as a chambermaid in a hotel way back, and they never, ever, ever in that hotel put women on the ground floor if they were staying on their own, just in case someone could come in the window. It was a policy. They always were on the second floor or above. Yeah, it's a certain chain. I don't know, can I name the chain?
Yeah.
Premier Inn. Which comes up to Premier Inn. Don't know if they still do it because this is like maybe about 17 years ago. But I always remember I got told that single women making a booking, we automatically never put them on the ground floor. Because I suppose if you're on the ground floor, technically, someone can break in the window.
Absolutely. I mean, it's horrible that we've got to do that, but respect to them for keeping women safe. Like that's, I'm going to book with Premier Inn.
I know, and they're very clean. They're very clean. They have very high standards. When I was a chambermaid, and the checklist you had to do and the trouble you got in if you didn't do them, they're very clean.
Oh wow, that's very good to know. I actually really respect them for that.
Stay for picking them up like that. Come on, Premier Inn, give me.
Yeah, honestly, give our Louise a free night. So I want to ask, because I could talk about this book for a lot longer, but I am worried about going to spoiler territory. I'm really excited for people to read this. It's also perfect for this time of year because even though it's very scary, it just feels like there's something more unsettling about it now that the nights are getting darker earlier, like it is in the book. She's watching out the window and it's like 4:20 and she's like, great, it's getting dark now. I just think it's a great book for this time of year. But I want to get some advice for writers off you, if that's okay. okay.
Yeah.
Because I read on your website the various rejections that you faced, I think, at the start of your career. And I wanted to know what advice you would give to writers that are going through similar, where they're kind of in the midst of getting a lot of those rejections.
Oh, resilience.
Yeah.
Gosh, resilience is the word. Funny enough, I'm doing a little talk tomorrow at my local university, and the
Oh,
theme is
wow.
resilience, weirdly. And resilience, and I suppose what I mean by resilience is, gosh, you've got to develop a thick skin for those rejections because, I mean, you're an actress, so you probably know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about. Because so the first book that I wrote, which ended up being both one that got published, as in, because I got all my books rejected. So the first book I wrote, you just think, oh, I'll send it out, I'll end up published. Well, it got rejected by absolutely everyone. And it's very hard when that happens to write another one.
Yeah.
But I always thought to myself, if I just stop, it's not going to happen. It's that simple. So I did that, and I did that 4 times. And everyone said to me, how did you write book 2, book 3, and then book 4 when they'd all been rejected? And I said, I would have gone on forever until someone bought one of my books, because there was just a sort of a self-belief. Because self-belief, right, is not conceit, right? Because self-belief is knowing your strengths and your flaws. People think self-belief means that you're really arrogant and confident. It
Not
doesn't.
at
It
all.
just means, it doesn't it? It means you
No.
know kind of what you're good at. And I
Yeah.
know I'm good at writing, and
Yeah.
I know I love it, and I know I wanted to do it. So
Yeah.
I just thought, if you stop Louise, it's not going to happen. So I would have gone on. So I suppose it's having the self-belief, a little bit of cheek, because I finally got my book deal ultimately with a render because I tweeted them. Now, it's not generally what you should do, and it doesn't usually work, but I kind of pitched the book, and she said, send it to me. And I thought, oh, maybe just humouring me. And then I got my book deal. So also
Oh,
a bit of
wow.
cheek. Yeah, a bit of,
Bit
if
of
you're
cheek.
polite and friendly, a little bit of cheek maybe. But oh, it sounds like such a cliche, but the not giving up really is the one.
Yeah.
You really want it and you really think you're meant to do it. Just keep writing and
Yeah.
keep sending it and keep writing, and let the rejections kind of be the fire and the anger that makes you think, sod you, I will get published. I will.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you need. You need that resilience. And I think it's knowing that you might not be one person's cup of tea, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be somebody else's. And
Mm.
I think, it's I think it's used sometimes to kind of deter people. Like we're told a lot as actors that like, oh, there's so many actors out there. And I used to be told like when I was applying for agents, like, oh yeah, there's your casting bracket's oversaturated. And it's used as a way to like deter you, and actually like,
Mm.
okay, yeah, there's a lot of us out there, but also there's something unique with me. Like there's
Yeah,
something unique in the way
yeah,
I perform and the way I work, and who I am as a person and what I'm like to work with. So yes, there's lots of actors out there generally, but there's only one of me. And I
yes,
think
that's
it's
the thing.
remembering like your individual qualities and your individual kind of skills, and it's like that with writers. Like, yes, there might be similarities, but that doesn't mean that that person isn't their own unique individual. So
And if
it's
you're
always important
supposed
to
to
remember
do
that.
it, it'll happen. I'm a big believer in
Absolutely.
that. If you're
Yeah.
supposed to, if it's supposed to be what you're doing, it will happen. And
Yeah.
I guess some of you might ask me, if you were on book 308, would you carry on? I might then think maybe this is not for me then. Maybe. But you know what? Even then, I'd be very reluctant to stop.
Yeah, of course. Because it's something
Yeah,
you love. And why should you stop doing something you love?
yeah, I
Yeah.
would. Yeah, I do. It's a joy. Yeah, I love writing so much.
Well, it was a joy to read your book, so thank you for writing it. What is next for you?
Oh gosh, okay. Well,
I
that's a
ask whilst you've just finished, like, there's a 22-date tour of your play, there's the
yeah,
book's just come
yeah.
out.
I'll be honest, this is a bit of a, let's say, crossroads almost, because I'm what we call out of contract with the end of Sorry Lights Out, and the play's now done. For now, we don't know. So I'm kind of, and the book I've just written, which I feel like it's one of the best ones I've written, has gone out on submission.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, for the first time in my life, which is terrifying, but also a little bit, I don't know. I have this optimistic feeling. I don't know, but
Good.
I can tell you what's next, and I've never. Oh God, that's actually scary to say. I don't quite know. I mean, Lights Out has to come out in paperback, and
Yeah.
I'll always do my podcast talks, book groups. And there may be something else happening with the play, possibly. I'm speaking to someone at the minute about that. So maybe I can say those things, that there is a book
Yeah.
submission, and it's one of my own personal faves. So soon as I know, you'll know is the thing.
Very
As soon as I know,
exciting.
you'll know.
Very exciting. And I actually think Lights Out would be very good for TV as well.
Mm,
So I think, yeah, Louise, what do you feel
yeah.
about adapting it?
Oh God. Now that's something I don't know how to write, but I'll never say never. I
It
am
would be
one of
great. I could visualize it all. So
I
yeah,
should
I
look into that because,
absolutely.
a writer's a writer at the end of the day, whatever it's
Exactly.
doing. Never say never. Who knows?
So exciting. I will round this episode off by asking for a recommendation. So it can be books, TV, film. What would you like to recommend?
I'm going to recommend one of my all-time favorite books, but it's
Yay.
not an easy read.
Okay.
And it's a great big fat book. Am I giving clues to you? You might have read it. A great big fat book that's about 900 pages.
Is it A Little Life?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, it's really weird because when people say, tell me what it's about, tell me why you loved it, you're like, okay, what to say.
Yeah.
It's the most traumatic book I've ever read
Yeah.
because there was a point when my husband came in and I was crying that much reading it. He thought someone I knew had actually died, as in he really thought something had happened to me. And I won't say what in case anyone
Yeah.
reads it. I said, such and such has happened to Jude, main character. I was like, oh my God. And I've never had a character haunt me so much after a book as
Yeah.
Jude. And there's just something about the language and the writing and the in-depth exploration. So basically, it's four characters who live in New York and they were friends when they were students, and then they live in apartments together. And that's the gist of it. The
Yeah.
main character is really Jude. And it's kind of about Jude's trauma and difficulty because he had a horrific, horrific childhood. And that's about the gist of it. And yet that doesn't sell it, does it?
No, but
It
I think that's the best way to summarize it because I think it is about his journey and how those things that happened to him in his childhood, how that then impacts him later on in
doesn't.
life, how that impacts his thoughts on himself, how that impacts what he goes on to do, how he is in relationships, how he is in his friendships. It infects like his daily life.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think, it's devastating to read and to
yeah.
see that kind of unraveling of a person, but it's also, it sounds really dark to say it's fascinating. That's not the right
It
word,
is,
but
but it
I
is
think it
fascinating.
is like, and she writes incredible like
Yeah,
characters. The way she develops her
yeah,
characters and their
yeah.
friendships and relationship dynamics is just
It's
perfect.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is relentless though, but it is
it is
beautiful.
relentless. I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend it for anybody who's going through any trauma
Yeah.
at that moment. I read it in a reasonably good place. I wouldn't have otherwise. But I saw her interviewed, and she said that she just wanted to explore unrelentless, horrific life
Yeah.
and actually explore it almost where most books, they give you a nice happy ending and oh, it's
Yeah.
all right in the edge. And she wanted to really go there and almost not be hopeful and just look
Yeah.
at how these things can affect people and some people don't come out of it well.
No.
And it's brave to do because I admit I don't think I'd want to write anything where there wasn't ultimately hope at the end, because that's a theme I love. Ultimately, there's hope. I like that
Yeah.
thing. You wouldn't think I'd like that book, and yet I did.
It's very brave of her to do that, but I
It's very
think
brave. It could have
that
been
is it
hated.
is it is like the reality for some people, that
Yeah.
is life for some people that actually things are just shit forever. And it's not
Well,
nice to read about, but like
that's
it
probably a
is
good
truth.
summary of what you just said is a great. What's it about? Someone whose life is shit forever. That's a great summary. That'll get them all reading it. Come on, folks. Read it now. Somebody whose life is
It's
shit
out now.
forever.
You can buy it in your local bookshop.
Oh dear. Yeah.
But to finish off, your book is out now, and
Yeah.
they can go and buy that in other
Yeah.
bookshops. And I'm going to pop a link in the show notes for people to order their copy if they've not got one already. Where can they find you online?
Oh gosh, me floating everywhere. So I am still on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'm still on there at Louise Writer, and I'm on Facebook. Just my real name is Louise Beach.
Yeah,
But in brackets it says Louise Swanson on there. I like Instagram at the minute. It's the most sort of happy place at the minute.
yes.
At Louise under dash Beach under dash Swanson. So at Louise Beach Swanson basically. And website www.louisebeach.co.uk.
Wonderful.
I think those are the ones. And I like getting messages. I always try and respond to any messages I get. I really do like connecting with readers.
Oh, I love that so much. Louise, thank you so much for joining me on A Pair of Bookends today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Me too. I've enjoyed every minute.
Oh, thank you. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. Go follow Louise, go give Lights Out a read because it's amazing, and come and let us know what you thought of it. But that is all we've got time for, so thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.